Ever felt like you were capable of more? We did too. That's why we started No Limits. Join Ryan and Sophie on a journey of topic we all know a little too well.
Oh, absolutely. Sounds like we're diving into the world of stress today.
You got it.
Go ahead.
We're diving deep into how to manage stress in everyday life. Our mission to sift the noise and uncover those golden nuggets of practical wisdom.
This deep dive is going to be your stress-busting toolkit, all based on how to manage stress in everyday life. And not just on our minds, but on our bodies too, like how well we can even function.
That's so true. I know when I'm stressed, it feels like my emotions are just running amok, dragging my poor body along for the ride. It really is, think about it. Running late for work, stuck in traffic, phones blowing up. That's not just an annoying situation, that's a whole physiological response happening.
Mm.
Heart rate's up, cortisol's pumping, your body's basically in fight or flight mode.
Hold on, fight or flight? You're talking about our ancestors outrunning saber-toothed tigers.
Right.
What's that got to do with me being late for a meeting?
That's a thing. Our bodies haven't quite caught up to modern life. Back then, that adrenaline was meant to help us escape danger, and then things went back to normal. But today, we're constantly bombarded with deadlines, bills, social media. It's like our systems are stuck on overdrive.
No wonder we're all so burnt out. So you're saying my brain thinks every traffic jam is a life or death situation.
Kinda, yeah. And that's where the two types of stress come in, emotional and physical. And they often go hand in hand. Take that traffic jam again. The emotional stress of being late triggers physical reactions like muscle tension, headaches, even digestive issues. Chronic emotional stress can make us more susceptible to getting sick.
So apparently when we're stressed, our bodies go a little haywire, right?
Right.
We're talking like 30 times the normal amount of hormones, even if the threat is just, I don't know, missing the bus or something.
And that's the thing, our bodies often can't tell the difference between a real life or death threat and, spilling coffee on your shirt 5 minutes before a meeting.
It's true. It all feels catastrophic in the moment.
Right. Cortisol's the one that overstays its welcome.
Oh no, what does cortisol do?
So when we're chronically stressed, cortisol just hangs out in our system, and that's when we start to see the negative impacts.
Like what?
Well, it can suppress our immune system, mess with our sleep, even contribute to those cravings for sugary, fatty foods, the stuff that actually makes us feel worse in the long run.
Okay, so basically, cortisol is public enemy number one when it comes to stress.
Pretty much. And this is where understanding those different types of stress becomes so important. We tend to focus on the emotional stuff, work, relationships, the usual suspects.
Yeah.
But physical stress things like bad posture, too much caffeine, even that extra glass of wine to unwind, that triggers the same hormonal cascade, including our friend cortisol.
It's like no matter what we do, something is out to get us.
And that's why this deep dive, this conversation, it's so important. Because once we understand how stress operates, how those different types of stress, emotional and physical, all feed into this hormonal roller coaster,
Right.
we can start to make informed choices that actually help us regain a sense of control over our well-being.
That's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. It's not about erasing stress completely. It's more about how do we manage how we react to it? How do we get back in the driver's seat?
It really is about finding that balance, right? Like, how do we acknowledge the stress but not let it take over?
So where do we start?
Well, how about we start with a classic? Exercise.
Okay, but everyone always says that. Exercise is good for stress. I feel like I've heard that my whole life.
Right, but there's a reason for that.
Okay, I'm listening.
Exercise changes how our brains actually respond to stress over time. It's like we're building up resilience, so it's not just a quick fix, it's like a long-term investment in our well-being.
Okay, so it's like we're training our brains to be less reactive to stress. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Does it matter what kind of exercise? Because I am definitely more of a leisurely walk in the park kind of person versus like intense gym workouts.
While all movement is good, certain types of exercise can be especially helpful,
Okay, like what?
like yoga and Tai Chi, because they combine movement with mindfulness, so it's like a double whammy of stress reduction.
Interesting. I've always wanted to try Tai Chi so I could swap out some of my uh, less than enthusiastic jogs for like some calming yoga and potentially get even more stress-busting benefits.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you.
Okay, so we've got exercise. What else?
Let's talk about sleep, or the lack thereof, which is something I think a lot of us struggle with.
Ugh, tell me about it.
When I'm stressed, sleep is usually the first thing to go.
And it's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
Sleep deprivation is a stress multiplier.
Okay, that sounds ominous, but accurate.
Because when we don't get enough sleep, that cortisol, remember,
Yeah, our nemesis.
it stays elevated, making us more reactive to even small stressors.
Ugh. So it's like a vicious cycle. I'm not sleeping because I'm stressed, and I'm more stressed because I'm not sleeping.
Exactly. It's all connected. But it's not all doom and gloom, because once you're aware of these connections, you can start to make changes. Maybe some of these other tips will help with the sleep too.
Okay, I'm listening. What else can we do?
Well, this one might seem a little obvious, but it's something we often neglect when we're stressed,
Okay.
and that's nurturing our social connections.
Also, like hanging out with friends, call my mom, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So simple, but I never think about it.
Right. Because it feels like indulgent almost when we have so much else going on. But a ton of studies show how strong social connections can actually act as a buffer against stress.
Wait, really? So I'm not just being lazy when I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm actually, like, boosting my resilience. I like it.
You got it. Laughter really is the best medicine, and spending time with loved ones, it releases all those feel-good hormones like oxytocin, which directly counteracts the effects of cortisol.
This is all making me realize how much I've been neglecting my social life in the name of productivity.
Mm-hmm.
No more. Friends, phone calls, all of it. It's officially stress management from now on.
And pets.
Oh, right. Cuddling with my cat is like its own form of therapy, honestly.
It's true. They actually did studies on this, measuring people's stress hormones before and after hanging out with their dogs.
No way, seriously. And what'd they find?
Huge dips in cortisol and a surge in oxytocin, that feel-good hormone.
Okay, so science says cuddles less stress. Got it.
Exactly. But I think what's really key here is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach, right?
That's true. I was just thinking about that. What works for one person?
Totally. Like some people thrive on intense workouts, others need something more low-key, like a nature walk.
Yeah. Or like some people need a big, loud friend group, and others are good with just a couple close pals.
It's about figuring out what your own personal stress-busting style is, what really fills your cup.
And not beating yourself up if it looks different from what everyone else is doing.
Exactly.
One thing that really jumped out at me was the power of having routines.
Routines. I'll admit, I can be a bit of a free spirit sometimes.
I hear you, but it's not about being rigid. It's more about creating some structure, right?
Yeah.
Which can actually make you feel more in control, especially when life feels chaotic.
That's an interesting way to look at it. It's not about limiting yourself. It's about creating a sense of calm amidst the chaos. One that I thought was interesting, it's going to sound simple, but carve out hobby time. And before you say, ugh, one more thing to do, listen to this. Doing something you enjoy can cut stress levels almost to half. Almost half. That's huge.
Are you serious? I had no idea it was that impactful. I mean, I always feel better after I've been puttering around in my garden, but I thought that was just a nice distraction. To know there's science behind it, that's motivating.
Right. It makes sense, though, when we're doing something we enjoy, something creative especially. Our minds are totally in the moment, not dwelling on the past, not worrying about the future, just being. And that in itself, huge stress reliever.
I love that. And it doesn't have to be something big or time-consuming. Just listening to music, reading, spending time in nature. It's about finding those little pockets of joy.
Absolutely. And speaking of connection, another one that stuck with me was connect with supportive people. And I don't just mean venting to your friend, although, hey, that helps too. Genuine face-to-face interaction. Turns out those kinds of interactions release hormones, oxytocin, stuff like that, which have been proven to reduce stress. Makes you feel better.
Okay, see, this is the kind of stuff I love to uncover. I knew spending time with loved ones made me feel better, but I didn't realize there was an actual physiological response happening. It's like a scientific hug.
Exactly. It's like a built-in stress antidote. And it makes sense. We're social creatures, right? Connection is in our DNA. So when we prioritize our relationships, make time for those real interactions, we're really taking care of our mental and emotional well-being.
So glad you brought that one up. All right, what else from this toolkit really jumped out at you?
I've got to be honest, when I saw practice meditation, I was skeptical, I'll admit it. Always seemed a little too, woo-woo for me, like it's something only yoga instructors do up on a mountain.
Okay, I'm with you on that one. I always been intimidated by meditation. Like, am I just supposed to sit here and empty my mind? Because my mind never shuts up.
Right. But here's the thing. It's not about emptying your mind. It's more about focusing it, like you're training a muscle, the muscle of attention.
Okay, I like that analogy. So instead of trying to fight off all the thoughts, I'm learning to direct my attention. Right.
Exactly. Because when we meditate, even just for a few minutes, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's our body's natural chill out mode.
So it's like hitting the brakes on that runaway stress train.
Exactly. Plus, there are tons of different ways to meditate.
Something that really resonated with me was the whole self-awareness thing. Because none of these strategies are going to work if we don't even realize we're stressed, right? If we don't know what sets us off.
Exactly. It's like trying to find your way through a maze in the dark. Self-awareness, that's turning on the lights, seeing the patterns, getting it.
It's like they say, knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
The more we understand our own stress, the better we can deal with it.
Exactly. And sometimes that means getting a little help, not being afraid to reach out, talk to a professional if you need to.
Right. It's like we wouldn't hesitate to see a doctor for a physical problem. Right. Mental health, that's important too. It's not weak to ask for help. It actually takes strength to admit you need it. This is why I love deep dives. We're not just scratching the surface here. We are uncovering the good stuff.
It's not about following a rigid set of rules.
Right. It's more like, here's a bunch of options. Go experiment, see what feels good.
Yes. And you can mix and match too. Like maybe you combine a morning meditation session with an evening phone call to a friend, or you unwind after work with a dog walk and a good book.
See, now you're speaking my language. Multitasking my way to less stress, I like it.
But we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about all the amazing resources.
Absolutely. They've got this fantastic book list for those who really want to geek out on stress management. Okay, this first one, the title alone had me hooked. Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. I mean, why don't zebras get ulcers?
Right. The book dives into the science of stress, comparing how humans react to stress compared to, well, animals in the
I
wild.
can already see the memes. A zebra chilling out, eating grass, while I'm over here drowning in to-do lists. I need to get my hands on this book. What else is on our reading list?
Well, since you're all about those practical tips, I thought you might enjoy some of the mindfulness-focused books. There's one in particular, it's called Expert Speaker Names a Specific Mindfulness Book from the Sources List, choosing one they feel would resonate with the listener's learner profile. And it's really great for weaving mindfulness into your daily life, without it feeling like this big, overwhelming thing.
Perfect. Consider it added to my reading list. And don't worry, listeners, we'll link to all of these in the show notes so you can check them out too. It's like our own little stressless book club.
Love it. And remember, this is a journey, right? It's not about being perfect. It's about finding what works for you.
Exactly. Take it one step at a time.
Up next, a classic. Wherever you go, there you are, by Jon Kabat-Zinn. This is the mastermind behind the mindfulness-based stress reduction program used in hospitals, like everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. If we're talking about mastering our minds, this one is it.
I've tried mindfulness before, but the empty your mind thing never clicked for me. What's the real message here?
It's not about emptying your mind, but more about being present. Not dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, just being here, now. Sounds simple, but it's tough in our busy world.
So more like directing our attention, not erasing everything. Makes more sense. But how does that help with stress?
Well, think about it. When we're stressed, our minds are racing, right? Mindfulness brings us back to the present, which can be calming when everything else feels out of control.
I'm seeing a pattern here. Both these books, it's about realizing we have more control over our thoughts than we think.
Absolutely. It's about building those inner tools to deal with life's ups and downs. Stress, it's a natural part of being human. What if, instead of trying to banish it completely, we try to become more, resilient to it? What if we viewed stress as an opportunity for growth?
It's a powerful shift in perspective, isn't it? Not just managing stress, but almost like befriending it, using it to become stronger.
Right. It's like stress is the wave and we're learning to surf. On that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of stress management. Remember, you've got the power to not just survive stress, but to thrive in spite of it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into stress management. We'll be back soon with more, including our next deep dive on, you guessed it, time management. Because who couldn't use a little more time, right? Until then, be kind to yourselves, take those breaks, and remember, you've got this.